I'm going to start my talk this morning by showing a video. It's actually a splicing of two, and I thank Matt Denton for splicing those together. One is called The Infinite Field of Potential, and the other one is called The Cosmic Eye.
It has been said that we are deeply connected by an invisible field that unites us all. Mystics have known about it for millennia. Scientists are on the cusp of proving its existence. The first to hypothesize about this field was a little-known physicist named David Bohm.
Some source of new ideas is needed of a much higher energy.
Einstein referred to him as his spiritual son, and the Dalai Lama relied on Bohm to be his science guru. But the scientific orthodoxy worked hard to suppress his radical ideas. Raised during the Great Depression in a Pennsylvania coal mining town, his childhood was hard. Yet Bohm possessed a rare and maverick intelligence that got the attention of the greatest minds in science. Bohm then began to explore a revolutionary idea.
The Bohmian theory made a clear prediction about the non-locality of the world. What is non-locality? Non-locality is really, to put it in simple words, the profound discovery of the interconnectedness of the universe.
But Bohm's progressive ideas were a threat to the scientific and political establishment at a time when they were focused on one thing alone.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
It was decades before we developed sufficient computing power to simulate Bohm's mathematics, describing this quantum potential that underlies the known universe.
We were quite staggered how amazing this story was, which had never been told.
Today, scientists are devising experiments to prove the existence of the quantum potential.
The work of people like Bohm, Einstein, they are like huge windows opening in the imagination to a way of dealing with life and the things we encounter within it.
David Bohm, I think really something like opener of our mind. So grateful.
Pretty awesome, isn't it? With our human naked eyes, it is impossible for us to see the vastness of the quantum field of infinite potential. And with our human minds, it is very difficult to understand that vastness. It is difficult to understand the power and the pure potentiality that is alive within the quantum field of infinite potential. And despite not having fancy scientific equipment like the Hubble telescope, throughout the centuries, as the video alluded to, mystics knew about the infinite field of quantum potential. That is actually one picture taken from the Hubble telescope. And through the ages, mystics have referred to this quantum field of infinite potential as God, the Godhead, divine mind, universal mind, mind, great spirit, cosmic heartbeat of the universe, holy presence, mysterious presence, beloved, beloved one. And so I invite you to place into the chat other names that you have heard the quantum field of infinite potential referred as. All in all. Allah, absolutely, universal energy, the one, spirit. Buddha, Mother, Father, God, divine mind, infinite intelligence, awesome. And with mystics through the ages, by whatever name we call that quantum field, infinite potential, whether it be God, divine mind, knew with their inner cosmic eye the power of infinite potential. Last week, I asked you to lean into the belief of moving away from God as a mythical being, a deity, a bearded person in the sky, a father figure, a mother figure, and to lean into as God as principle. And that principle is infinite potential. And I also shared with you a quote by Myrtle Fillmore. And to summarize, it said that, you know, God does not have gender as neither male nor female. It is it. And that God is principle. And we can see Myrtle and Charles were not the only mystics who knew that. Here we see in this quote from Gandhi, God is not a person. God is an external principle that is alive within the whole of the universe. And today I want to move us into the understanding. You know, we are doing this series on trust. When we say we trust God, when we say we trust God as principle, that infinite potential, the quantum potential that is unfathomable and holds the field of energy, of possibility, what we are meaning. And in order to do that, we are going to be looking at universal laws of that infinite potential, meaning, and law is principle in expression or action. So God as principle and expression. And I'm going to be sharing some laws, principle and action of the universe, of quantum potential, whether you believe in them or not. They are unchangeable, they are constant. And then I'm going to move into sharing one law of consciousness. And so that when we know the universal laws of quantum potential, how can we tap into them? How could we use principle in expression, God in expression in our lives? Now, I'm only going to have time to share one of consciousness, and many of these you've probably heard of, but I'm hoping that it's going to take you even deeper. And then next week, I'm going to be looking at a few more of the laws of consciousness. So we start with our first law. Before I go into the law of oneness, there's another beautiful quote here from Myrtle Fillmore, which talks about how we use principle and what we mean, how we can use God, universal law, in our lives in action. And she states in Healing Letters, principle, God is our servant. Did you ever think of that? That this wonderful universal principle, all of which everything is made, is here at all times, constant, unchangeable, and is always present within us, and we are using principle whether we know it or not. So it takes us into the first law of the universe that I will share with you. We often hear and we affirm there is one power and one presence in the universe, and we usually can, within unity circles, say, God, the good, omnipotent. And the word good has a lot attached to it, but what we mean, not in the duality sense of good and bad, but it is the principle of benevolence in action. So that one power and presence, that infinite potential, that quantum field of universal presence, the law of oneness says it's everywhere present. It contains the highest intelligence frequency, that it shows through the divine matrix in the field, like we saw, not only of Bohm, but of the work of Greg Braden and Lynn McTaggart that I shared last week, that everything is interconnected. That's what we mean by oneness. We think, we say that we are all one, and sometimes it can become a cliche, but what does that actually mean? And there is the principle of oneness in consciousness, which I will talk about next week. But it means that all is one. We often hear Carolyn Mace. We've been studying, our Thursday afternoon class has been studying the anatomy of the spirit. And as we look at our root chakra, the mantra and the teaching is all is one. All life breathes together. So there is no such thing as we get into the law of vibration, to realize that everything I do has impact on others, which we have talked about in many different lessons. And as we look at the law of oneness as well, we know, and I touched base on this last week, that all matter, all life has its origin or emanates from the quantum field of potential God. And embedded in the DNA of humans is the God code, which is the letters YHVH. And what do I mean by that? Greg Braden, who is a scientist and a spiritual teacher, did some research. And when he took the Kabbalah and the Hebrew letters, and he correlated the essential elements of the human body, which are hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon, everybody's DNA and all of life broke down to the letters YHVH, which in the Hebrew language is the equivalent to God. Now let's take a look at the law of vibration. And I share with you a quote from Creed McGregor, who wrote the 7 Universal Laws of the Universe. When we look at a subatomic level at any substance, we do not find matter, but rather pure energy, energy that is vibrating and moving. Nothing rests, including human beings. And we can see Nikola Tesla also believes in this. As you look at his quote to the right, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, of frequency, and vibration. So we're going to see how knowing that everything has vibration and a frequency, how that can help us in our lives. And so the law of rhythm is the next universal law. And again, we've heard of these before. When we, at Easter time, we talk about the crucifixion, the void, and the resurrection, which is the cyclical nature of life, of consciousness, of evolving. And other names for the law of rhythm are the law of cycles and the law of flow. And McGregor here states that everything flows in the universe. Everything has rhythm. All things flow in, and all things flow out. And all things rise, and all things fall. As a thing begins to slow as it reaches a peaking point before beginning a backward swing in the opposite direction. It then peaks on the other end and then repeats the whole process. It is this law that determines the seasons, the cycles, and the patterns in all things. What seems random is actually very orderly and in perfect rhythm. And so some examples of the law of rhythm we see when we go to the beach and we watch the waves crash in and they return back out to sea. We see our seasons change, and depending on where you live, there is some greater change than in other areas. We see this in our bodies. If you know anything about exercise, physiology, the physiological makeup of the body, when you are doing some weight-bearing exercises, we learn that the muscle breaks down in order for it to be built back up stronger. And this cycle continues. If you continue to do weight-bearing exercise, whether it's bands or lifting weights, you will constantly see this process and you'll say, oh my gosh, I feel a little sore when our muscles break down. And then as they begin to heal, we can feel ourselves stronger. And then next thing you know, we're moving from 3 pound, I know much more of you can do shoulders more than 3 pounds, but that's where I am right now, to 5 pounds and so on and so on. And we see the rhythms and the cycles even flowing in our lives, right? How many of us have been on a high in our lives? Like, we're manifesting what we want, we're getting the job we want, things are flowing wonderfully in our life, and then all of a sudden, boom, it feels like the rug has been taken out from underneath us, or we hit this wall. And so sometimes when we are experiencing that cycle of endings or hitting that wall, so to speak, some of us may find ourselves saying, oh my gosh, I thought I worked on that. I thought I was a little bit more spiritually evolved than I am. Or we may even find, if we reach for that mystical knowing or mystical belief in God, how could God let this happen? And so I just invite you, knowing this law of rhythm, of cycle and flow, and just maybe say, oh, this is the cycle of the law of cycle at work, the law of rhythm, the law of flow. And certainly we need to do this because there are laws of the universe, and then we live in impermanence. The physical world has its whole other set of dimensions where things change, where they break down. So we know that that is also repeated, and everything in the universe seeks that order. And sometimes when we see storms happening, we don't understand all that, but underneath that all is that cycle of flow and of trying to create order. So next time, not only when you see this breakdown happening or the flow, or maybe it's at the end of endings or death, maybe one of the things that you could ask besides, okay, where am I seeking to evolve? But what is desiring change in my life? How could I evolve my understanding of life, of things, of who I am to a greater understanding. And so this is the first law of consciousness, which is the law of cause and effect. And this has been called many things: the law of mind action, the law of manifestation, the law of creation, so on and so on. And it's all meaning the same. And this law of cause and effect actually taps into knowing the law of vibration, the law of oneness, and the law of cycles. And so we know, like within metaphysics, in the Fillmores, Bertel and Charles Fillmore spoke, thoughts held in mind, energized with our feeling nature, produce after their kind. So let's go even deeper as we look at the law of vibration. Every thought, emotion, word, action carries a vibrational frequency and shapes infinite potential. Myrtle talked about God being our servant. This is what it means, right? The vibration, the cause and effect, every thought, every emotion, every word, every action carries a vibration and shapes infinite potential into expression, into manifestation. It also states that everything in manifest form is called effect and has its origins, cause, in consciousness. And by consciousness, we mean the vibration of our thoughts, our feelings, words, and actions. So how does knowing this law, and again, many of you know about the law of attraction. Many of you have manifested parking spaces, jobs, relationships, and even improve the quality of your health. So knowing this, we are called to really look at the power of choice. Carolyn Mace speaks of the power of choice, and she states that we have no idea how powerful we are. She reminds us that there is no such thing as an inconsequential word, thought, belief, or action. That every thought, word, action, and belief that we hold in frequency, and we get to choose because we have free will, is an act of creation. And through the ages, humankind has really fallen asleep and has wielded this power, as we saw in the video earlier, to use that power to create an atom bomb, to destroy, to control. But it is an age of awakening. The masters have been telling us forever, and I guess you can say that we are slow learners at times. And so, how do we wield our power of choice, knowing that everything that I hold has a frequency and not only impacts my health, my well-being, has an impact on my experiences, but because of the law of oneness, knowing our interconnectivity impact others and the world around me. Yes, I know I've talked about this, and I know this is probably, for many of you, nothing new. But I'm asking myself, and I invite you into this, how can I live it more consciously now, even knowing more exquisitely the laws of the universe? And knowing that I am a creator and that I tap into God, pure potential, by the power of my choices. My friends, as we move away from understanding God as a deity, not just in a statement we say, not in an affirmation, but in the very beingness, as we begin to really utilize and understand the laws of oneness, of vibration, of cycles, and we begin to tap into them, to the laws of consciousness, of cause and effect, we get to be, just like the words that St. Francis invited us into, we get to be healers, transformers, lifting of what we see in this world that is so hurting with dis-ease and unfairness and unjust actions as we see others as less than. And so I would like to close and invite you to place that trust as you, as the alchemist, as you, as the wielder of God potential that is latent within you in this very universe. And I share this with you, the alchemist. The alchemist is one who transforms all energies into higher frequencies of light and love. They are the bringers of a new dawn. They're transmuting the old, by transmuting the old paradigms into a higher intelligence and order. They act solely for the highest good of all. Love is the only master they answer to. And I know and affirm that you are all powerful alchemists. Blessings of light, love, and power to you, my dear friends.